My son chose his stepdad over me after I raised him alone, so then made him realize what he'd truly lost. I'm a 43-year-old single father, and for most of my adult life, my entire world revolved around my son, Ethan. When Laura walked out on us, Ethan was barely still learning how to say dad. I remember standing in the doorway that morning, holding him while she packed her bags. She didn't even cry, just said she needed more than this life. I told myself I'd never let her absence define him, even if it meant losing myself in the process. Those first years were chaos. I worked double shifts at a construction firm and drove deliveries at night just to afford rent. Some mornings I'd come home with aching hands and grease-stained clothes, only to find Ethan awake, holding his stuffed bear by the window. I'd scoop him up, whispering, "Dad's here, buddy," and for that brief second, exhaustion didn't matter. I missed out on friends, promotions, even dating. My coworkers went out for drinks. I went home to reheat leftovers and help with finger paints. My boss once told me I had too much baggage to move up. Maybe he was right, but every sacrifice felt worth it the moment Ethan smiled or called me his hero. I still remember the smell of baby shampoo, the way he'd fall asleep against my chest while I hummed old rock songs off-key. Nights like that made me believe love could fix anything, that hard work could fill the gaps his mother left behind. I built our life piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck, thinking if I just kept giving, the universe would give us peace in return. But life doesn't always reward love. It tests it, and as I'd learned years later, no amount of devotion can stop someone you love from walking away. I met Melissa at the hardware store, where I worked part-time after my day shifts. She was in the aisle comparing paint samples, and I remember joking that she looked like she was trying to pick a color for her entire life. She laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt seen, not as Ethan's dad, not as the tired guy on the night shift, but as a man. We started talking, more coffee breaks that turned into dinners that turned into evenings spent helping her fix up her apartment. She had this calm presence, a way of making chaos seem manageable. Ethan liked her instantly. She'd bring cookies when she visited and let him talk her ear off about his toy cars. Watching them together made me believe maybe, just maybe, we could be a family again. "Dad, she's cool," Ethan once said, smiling up at me after she left. "You should marry her." I laughed, brushing it off, but the idea stayed with me. For years it had just been the two of us, surviving. Melissa made me imagine something more than survival. When she moved in a year later, everything felt balanced for a while. She cooked, kept the house warm, and filled it with laughter. But sometimes, when Ethan misbehaved and I'd raise my voice, she'd gently touch my arm and say, "He's just a kid. Don't be so harsh." Her tone was soft, but her eyes carried something else, pity, maybe judgment. I told myself she was just helping. One evening, as we tucked Ethan into bed, he whispered, "Good night, Mom." I froze. Melissa smiled, kissed his forehead, and didn't correct him. I should have said something, but instead, I swallowed the ache and told myself this was good. He finally had the mother figure he'd lost. But I didn't realize it then. Sometimes love doesn't build bridges. It quietly replaces you by the time Ethan turned 13. The house didn't sound like laughter anymore, sounded like debates I didn't start and silences I didn't understand. Melissa began questioning the way I parented him, always in the gentlest tones possible, but the words still cut deep. "Let him breathe, Daniel," she'd say, whenever I tried setting boundaries. "He's not a soldier, he's a kid." I'd respond, "He needs structure, not freedom to do whatever he wants," but it didn't matter. Ethan had already started echoing her words. One night, I told him to finish his homework before playing games, and he snapped back, "Mom says I deserve a break." You don't get it, that word Mom used to fill me with warmth. Now, it felt like a wedge. At first I told myself it was just teenage rebellion. Every parent goes through that phase, right? But Melissa wasn't just standing by, she was shaping it. Whenever Ethan pushed back, she'd defend him. If I grounded him, she'd sneak him dessert and whisper, "Your dad just worries too much." I overheard her once. I didn't confront her. I just stood there, feeling my authority dissolve one quiet sentence at a time. Family dinners turned cold. Ethan avoided eye contact. Melissa started sitting beside him instead of across from me, their whispered jokes filling the silence I used to share with my son. The distance grew in small, invisible increments, missed conversations, quick dismissals, arguments that ended with Ethan slamming doors. I could feel my role shrinking. I wasn't the hero anymore. I was the rule enforcer, the outsider in my own home. One evening, as I stood outside his door listening to them laugh together, I realized something that chilled me. I wasn't losing Ethan to rebellion or age. I was losing him to her. And she knew it. It started with a casual mention at dinner. Melissa said, "Tom's back in town." I didn't think much of it at first. Tom was her ex-husband, the man she used to describe as selfish and distant. So when she said he wanted to reconnect with Ethan like an uncle figure, I assumed it was harmless. I'd always believed that love could withstand anything if you were honest and consistent. Turns out, I was wrong. Tom began showing up at Ethan's soccer games, always in a crisp suit, like he'd come straight from some important meeting. He'd clap the loudest hand to Ethan's expensive gear and offered tips after practice. The other parents loved him. Even the coach joked, "Ethan's got two dads cheering him on." Everyone laughed except me at home. I started noticing changes. Ethan began quoting Tom's advice in confidence. Leadership. Thinking like a winner. I'd tell him to clean his room, and he'd say, "Tom says, successful people don't waste time on small stuff." I'd try to laugh it off, but inside, something was breaking. One Sunday, I found Ethan scrolling through photos on his phone, Tom, and him fishing at a game at some fancy restaurant. Photos I didn't even know existed. When I asked about it, Ethan just shrugged. "He gets me, Dad. You're always too tired." That one line gutted me. Too tired? After everything I'd sacrificed, every sleepless night, every missed opportunity, all he saw was exhaustion. Melissa didn't step in. She just put a hand on Ethan's shoulder and smiled faintly, like she'd been waiting for this moment. That night, I sat in the dark long after they went to bed, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I realized Tom wasn't just a presence, he was a replacement in progress. And I was watching, powerless. As my own son handed over the space I'd spent a lifetime earning, the fight that ended everything didn't start as a fight at all. It started over something small. Lethan, missing curfew again. I waited in the living room, the clock ticking past midnight. When he finally walked in, his voice was sharp before I even spoke. "Relax, Dad. I was with Tom," he said. "He'd text you." My chest tightened. "You don't live by Tom's rules, Ethan. You live by mine." He scoffed. "Yeah? Then maybe I should live with him instead." Melissa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing that calm expression she always used when I was the problem. "Daniel, you're overreacting. He's 17, not 7. Overreacting." My voice cracked under years of swallowed frustration. "You've been undermining me for years, and now he thinks respect is optional." Ethan slammed his backpack down. "Respect? You think barking orders is respect? Tom actually listens to me." The words echoed like a gunshot. I saw Melissa glance at him, half proud, half regretful, but she didn't stop him. Something in me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, quietly, "If that's what you believe, maybe you should go stay with him for a while." Ethan's eyes widened, waiting for me to take it back. I didn't. Within an hour, Tom was at the door. He hugged Ethan like a hero. I stood there, numb, as my son packed a duffel bag I'd bought him years ago. Melissa didn't even look at me when she said, "It's just for a few days." Days turned into weeks. Texts went unanswered. Photos popped up online, Ethan and Tom at games, dinners, smiling like I'd never existed. I sat alone in a half-empty house, surrounded by the echoes of laughter that used to belong to us. For the first time in 18 years, I had no one to care for, no one to come home to, and that's when I realized the cruelest truth of parenthood. Sometimes, love doesn't leave in one big moment. It fades quietly until you're the only one still holding on. Weeks bled into months. The silence between us became its own language. I kept telling myself Ethan would come home, that this was temporary, but the longer it went on, the more I realized something inside me had cracked beyond repair. Every morning, I'd make 2 cups of coffee out of habit, one for me, one for no one. His room stayed exactly as he left. Item-made bed, half-finished model car. The faint smell of his cologne that lingered long after he stopped coming back. I'd stand in the doorway sometimes, hoping to feel him there, but all I felt was absence. I texted him once more, I love you, son. Always will. He read it. No reply. That night, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I packed up the house over house and put it on the market. No big announcement, no confrontation. Just quiet resignation. I sold everything except a few boxes of memories. His baby shoes, drawings that said, "Best dad ever," and a faded photo of us on his first day of school. I left a letter on his desk. I didn't write anger or guilt into it, just love. I told him I was proud of the man he was becoming, that I hoped Tom was giving him the life I couldn't anymore, that I wasn't leaving because I stopped loving him, but because I finally understood love wasn't enough to make someone stay. Then I drove until the city lights disappeared behind me. No destination, no plan. The hum of the road and the sound of a man learning what silence truly costs. I didn't know it then, but that quiet departure, my surrender, would become the loudest lesson Ethan would ever hear. Ethan's life went on without me. It was like watching someone else live the life I thought I'd always have with him. He graduated high school, celebrated milestones, and Tom was there for every single one. The photos piled up on social media, Tom in the front row, hand on Ethan's shoulder like a proud father. Their smiles captured in moments I would never be part of. I watched it all from a distance, unable to stop myself. The first time I saw Ethan in one of those pictures, a part of me wanted to reach through the screen and pull him back. But I couldn't. I told myself it was fine. He had what he needed. Now someone who could give him everything I couldn't. But something felt off. I saw it in the way Ethan had changed. He wasn't the same kid who once asked me to teach him how to tie his shoes, or the one who laughed at my corny jokes. Now he wore this mask, always smiling, always looking like he was happy, but there was a void in his eyes. A vacancy I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. I heard from mutual friends sometimes. They'd tell me Ethan was doing well, that he'd landed a great job, had a girlfriend, was growing up fast, but their words didn't reach me anymore. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd heard his voice. I had to make myself believe it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't the one who let him slip away. Then came his birthday. A post on Facebook, Ethan and Tom standing side by side, grinning in front of a cake. I stared at it for hours, waiting for the raw ache in my chest to subside. It didn't. I used to be everything to him. Now, I was just someone in the background of his life, and that background hurt more than I ever imagined it would. I should have been stronger, but instead, I was just fading away. Didn't expect to hear from him again, not after everything. But one evening, almost a year after I left, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. When I picked up, there was silence on the other end. Then, a shaky voice I hadn't heard in far too long. "Dad." My heart nearly stopped. "Ethan." There was a long pause. "Yeah, it's me. I found your number." I wanted to talk. I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. After everything, after months of watching him slip away, he was calling me. I wanted to say all the things I'd held on to, but all I could manage was a simple, "I'm glad you called." He didn't respond right away. Instead, there was a shift in the air, like he was trying to gather the right words. Then, in a voice that cracked a little, he said, "I don't know what happened, Dad. I just started seeing Tom as, the person who cared more. I thought I needed him. I thought he wanted me. But then, I don't know. I've been lying to myself for so long." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The quiet regret in his voice was the same regret I'd buried for months. My son, my flesh and blood, admitting that he'd been fooled by someone who'd pretended to care. And that sting yet wasn't just for me. It was for him. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have never pushed you away. I didn't realize how much I needed you until you were gone." I sat down, the weight of his confession pushing me into the chair. I didn't know what to say. My hands shook as I held the phone. "I'm here," I finally whispered. "I've always been here." But he wasn't ready yet. Not fully. He needed time. I wanted to know you're okay," he said, voice almost breaking. "And I'm sorry for everything." I didn't hang up. We stayed on the phone for hours, catching up on the little things, the details of each other's lives. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start. And that, I realized, was more than I'd hoped for. After that phone call, I couldn't just let it go. I spent weeks thinking about what Ethan had said about how he didn't realize what he'd lost until I was gone. Part of me wanted to forgive him right away, but another part of me was scared. Scared that I'd fall back into the same old pattern, that I'd let him come back in, only to have him leave again. But that's not how healing works, is it? You can't just pick up where you left off. I realized that it wasn't just about him coming back to me. I had to meet him halfway, and I had to find out where I'd gone wrong. So I started looking for him more than just the texts and social media posts. I called old friends, anyone who might have known where he was, what he was doing. I tracked down his old soccer coach, asking if he'd seen Ethan at practice or knew where he'd been working. No one seemed to have the answers. Everyone kept saying the same thing. He's fine. He's doing well. But their words felt hollow. There was no depth behind them. No one could tell me what Ethan was really feeling. I couldn't stop myself. I became obsessed. Every street I passed, every coffee shop I walked into, I kept an eye out, hoping to spot him. I even drove past his old school, just to see if his car was parked out front. But the longer I searched, the more I realized this wasn't about finding him anymore. It was about finding myself again. I was still holding on to this image of Ethan that didn't exist anymore. The kid who looked up to me, the kid who used to ask me for help with everything, that kid was gone. But I wasn't. And that's when it hit me. If I didn't stop chasing him, I might never find peace. But as the weeks went by, I finally found the courage to stop. I stopped calling. I stopped driving by his places. I had to let him find me on his own terms. He needed space, not a man following him around like a shadow. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to take a step back, let him figure things out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was only halfway done. The call came when I least expected it. I was sitting in a small diner nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I had spent the morning sorting through more paperwork, more of my old life, the life I had tried to leave behind. Everything felt like it was moving at a slower pace than it used to. I was tired, but not physically. I was tired of waiting for things to get better. Tired of hoping for some kind of miracle that would bring Ethan back. The phone buzzed on the table. A name lighting up the screen. Ethan. I froze, staring at it like it was a ghost from my past. My fingers hesitated over the screen, but I knew I couldn't let it go to voicemail. His voice was soft, unsure. Ethan, I said, barely able to get the words out. How are you? I'm okay, but ... There was a long pause. Can I come see you? I need to talk. Something in me cracked, like a dam breaking wide open. He needed me. It was the first time in months I'd felt that pull, the one that had always been there, no matter how much space had grown between us. Any time, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We agreed on meeting at a parka-neutral place, somewhere away from everything. I drove there, my heart beating faster with every mile. The fear that had been with me for so long, the fear of being rejected again, of being too late, grew heavier with every passing minute. But this time, I couldn't run. I had to face whatever was coming, even if it broke me. When I saw him standing there by the old oak tree we used to visit when he was younger, I barely recognized him. He was taller, more mature. His face, once full of youthful excitement, was now more guarded, more like mine. I swallowed hard, but I didn't say anything. I just walked toward him. I'm sorry, Dad, he said the moment I reached him. His eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, and beneath that, something softer, something broken. I know, I replied, my voice thick. I didn't need him to apologize. What we both needed was to just be in that moment together, to acknowledge the space we had lost and the chance to rebuild it, piece by piece. But what I didn't expect was the next words that came out of his mouth. Dad, I think I've been lost for a while, and for the first time in so long, I realized it wasn't just Ethan who needed to find his way back. I had to find mine. To dot the conversation with Ethan that day didn't fix everything. I didn't expect it to. What it did was open the door again, a small crack that hadn't existed for so long. It wasn't an immediate rush of forgiveness or understanding, but something more real. We stood there for a while, in that awkward, painful silence, neither of us sure where to go next. But we knew one thing. We weren't done. Over the next few months, we started taking small steps. He'd text me, asking how I was, or sometimes he'd send me a picture of something silly he saw that reminded him of our old days. I responded cautiously at first, unsure how to handle this version of Ethan, the one who was no longer a child, but not yet the man he was supposed to be. Over the next few months, we started taking small steps. He'd text me, asking how I was, or sometimes he'd send me a picture of something silly he saw that reminded him of our old days. I responded cautiously at first, unsure how to handle this version of Ethan, the one who was no longer a child, but not yet the man he was supposed to be.